Janesville. Welcome to Park Place Views, brought to you by the City of Janesville and JATVMedia Services. I'm your host, Molly Nolte, and I'm the Management Information Specialist in the City Manager's Office. This monthly program aims to keep Janesville residents informed by highlighting the people, places, events, and partners in the City of Janesville. On last month's episode, we got to sit down with Emily Arthur, the Executive Director of the Business Improvement District. I got tons of information about all things downtown Janesville. In case you missed it, past episodes of Park Place Views are available to watch on the city's website or JATV's YouTube channel. On this month's episode, I'm really pleased to be spending time with my friend Erin Davis, who's the Director of Janesville Mobilizing for Change. Erin has been the Director of Janesville Mobilizing for Change, also known as JM4C, since 2017. Prior to JM4C, Erin worked with the House of Mercy Homeless Center for 12 years, where she saw the impact that alcohol and substance use disorders can have on individuals, their families, and their friends. Erin is pleased to have the opportunity to use prevention and early intervention strategies to improve outcomes. Thank you for joining us for the first time ever on Park Place Views, Erin.
Thank you for having us, Molly.
We're really excited to talk to you. Other than what I've already mentioned about you, is there anything else you'd like to highlight about yourself?
So I really am very focused on the youth in our community, mostly because I have youth in the community, and I want to make sure that it is a healthy place for my kids to grow up.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Well, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that if people aren't familiar with JM4C, let's just talk a little bit about the history of the organization, just to kind of familiarize our viewers with what you do.
Sure. So back in the 90s, a committee formed within the school district, the AODA committee, and what they were focusing on was how do we reduce rates of substance use in our youth. And from that committee, they formed Partners in Prevention. So Partners in Prevention served the entire county. They essentially do what JM4C does, and they received a Drug-Free Communities grant. When that grant ended, they decided it would be the most effective way to continue the work by moving it out across several different communities. So now we have coalitions in Janesville, in Beloit, in Evansville, and Edgerton, and we're all doing the same great work that Partners did, except we're not doing it under the same umbrella. So JM4C was picked up by the City of Janesville under Hedberg Public Library, and now we've been here for about 8 years.
Wonderful. And all of those other organizations you mentioned, those are still intact as well, so everyone's working together.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
We have one organization that will this year be finishing their own DFC grant, Drug-Free Communities, and then they'll be continuing without that. But yes, we've managed to build a really strong culture of substance-free youth in our county.
That's wonderful. So in your office, just in the JM4C in Janesville, how big is your staff? How many people are you working with?
We have a total of 5 staff, including myself. We have one person who works solely on LGBTQ plus issues. We know that substance use is more prevalent among that community, and so we're trying to reduce the risk factors for youth that are LGBTQ. We have a staff person who, up until recently, worked on our Project Aware grant, which was how we taught youth mental health first aid. We have somebody who works in youth systems, trying to reduce the impact of trauma on our youth. And then we have one person who is our Drug-Free Communities coordinator, and she does all things drug-free.
That's a very small amount of staff to take on so much responsibility and tackle these really kind of complex and sometimes difficult issues to deal with. So that's amazing that just you and 4 other team members are able to do that. And I think now hearing kind of the history and what your mission is, I think it's easy for everyone to agree that JM4C is doing really important and crucial work in our community. And you've touched on this just a little bit, but just for JM4C, how have you seen that organization kind of develop over the last 8 years?
So it started out small, I guess is what I would say. My understanding, and I wasn't there when it first began, but it started out in one small room in the office building and just one person in there. And then since then it just really took off. Then there were 2 staff, and then there were 3, and now we're up to 5. And we had to move to a bigger space. So I think it's really developed quite well. I think some of the issues that we're working on, we have more community support for and community awareness of, especially around the issue of trauma. It's amazing to me how many people have come forward to talk about how trauma has affected their life, and just shown their support for that issue. We know now that trauma, having some sort of trauma in your background, is the biggest risk factor for future drug use or substance use. And we also know that having one adult role model in your life, one supportive adult, is the biggest protective factor. So the fact that so many people can recognize trauma as being such a great risk, I think is phenomenal, because then they might step up to be that one supportive adult.
Right. Erin, why do you think there's such a need for your organization in the Janesville community?
So I think in all communities there is a need for somebody to be paying attention to youth substance use. In Wisconsin, we have a drinking culture that we need to pay specific attention to, so that our youth aren't caught up in that. And then even further than that, in Rock County, we have a high prevalence of adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. And ACEs are important in that the higher ACE score you have, the more likely you are to have a substance use disorder in the future. So Rock County, for example, has the highest prevalence of 4+ ACEs in Wisconsin, and so we just need to pay a little bit more attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great that we have a dedicated organization, not only in Janesville, but Rock County at large, with all of your partner organizations working together to deal with this very complex subject. So,
yes.
Erin, how is JM4C measuring its success?
So we utilize what's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It is a survey that students take in the high school and in the middle school, basically 8th through 12th grade. And we ask them a list of questions, a lot of questions, and some of them are regarding substance use and alcohol use. And so we'll ask them about if they find that there's harm in misusing alcohol, if there's harm in misusing prescription drugs and marijuana, smoking cigarettes, etc. And what we found is that from 2014 to 2018, there has been a decrease across the levels of use in our youth. And we've also seen an increase in the perception of harm. So we know that the lower perception of harm gets, the more likely kids are to use a certain substance. So, for example, with the marijuana being legalized in multiple states, we're seeing a decrease in the perception of harm for marijuana. So we should expect in future years that marijuana would, inch up. However, with alcohol and prescription drugs, which have been our main focus for the last several years, our risk of harm is relatively high and our use is relatively low.
That's good.
So one of the things that we're really happy to say is in the last 30 days, 80% of our youth did not use alcohol.
That's amazing.
Yes, and that's 80% of our high schoolers. Super exciting.
That sounds like JM4C's mission and what you guys have been doing the last 8 years starting to pay off.
Yes, absolutely. Especially, 2 years ago, 70% of our youth didn't drink alcohol.
Yeah.
So now it's 80.
That's huge.
It's very huge, very
Congratulations
exciting.
about
Thank you.
that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about funding. So
Sure.
JM4C, you mentioned, is kind of an arm of City of Janesville through the Hedberg Library. We're all kind of partners and together in this organization. But how is JM4C's funding a little bit different maybe than other parts of our organization?
So JM4C's funding is entirely federal, as it goes through the City of Janesville. So we receive the Drug Free Communities Grant, the STOP Act, which is supplemental to drug-free communities. We have funding through Rock County Human Services that is part of their federal block grant dollars, and then a couple of other federal sources. And those pay for our agency entirely. And then on another side, we also have a nonprofit 501c3 that has been set up where we can take local donations, grants from agencies such as the United Way, who's one of our partners, which is very exciting. And we also take contributions, by mail or
Yeah. So if people were
website.
interested in donating, they'd be able to do that through the 501c3 portion?
Yes.
Wonderful.
They can go to www.jm4c.org. We have a Donate Now button, and we're able to generate a tax-deductible receipt for them.
Wonderful. Well, that's great information for the community to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I just learned something new. So let's also talk about maybe some of the programming that JM4C does. I know you guys have a lot of different stuff going on. So let's talk about a couple specifically. I know that you have a new youth focus prevention strategy that's starting this summer, and you call it Prevention at the Park. So if you
Yes.
could tell us a little bit about that, that'd be great.
So Prevention in the Park is, we're super excited about this. It's beginning on the last Tuesday of this month, which I believe is July 30th. It's going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. in Janesville's 4th Ward Park. And we plan to host one of these a month, always on the last Tuesday, as weather permits will be in the 4th Ward Park. And although we're holding it in that neighborhood, it is for any youth in the city of Janesville who is looking for a substance-free activity.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so we're really excited. Our first one, we're kind of calling Pizza in the Park because, everybody likes pizza. right?
Obviously.
Yeah, it's pizza. So we're going to be having some activities, some games there that the kids can do, and at that time we're also going to survey them to find out how they would like to spend their time, because we want to make sure that we're doing enjoyable activities for the kids there. And the idea behind Prevention in the Park is that we'll have information about leading a substance-free life and information about why you want to have a substance-free life, but we'll also combine that with fun activities so that kids have an alternative choice.
Right, absolutely. That's wonderful. So by the time this episode airs, we'll be getting into kind of later summer, so folks can look forward to the August event. And then are you planning one in September, or as school starts, maybe taper off on those and then switch gears, or
Nope,
are we
we're
looking for...
we're planning to have them every single month.
Great.
Actually, the last Tuesday of December is New Year's Eve, and we decided we can't think of a better way to spend New Year's Eve
Absolutely.
than finding a substance-free activity
Yeah.
for our kids to do.
Yep, and I
So.
think, I hadn't really planned on talking about this, but it sort of just popped in my head, especially in Wisconsin's culture. It's a very strong drinking culture.
Yes.
I think a lot of people tend to think of celebrating and drinking kind of in the same exact way. So it's nice to maybe sort of change that culture, especially with our youth early on, that to have a good time, you don't necessarily have to be drinking or
Right.
doing something else, that isn't good for you. So that's a wonderful idea. Can't wait to hear more about that as the year progresses. So let's change gears again here. A lot of people are using technology to learn more about topics that they're interested in. I think we all know that. Most of us probably have a cell phone or a smartphone, or at least have internet access. They can come to the library. So using that technology. And another thing that I think is becoming really popular is podcasts.
Yes.
And from what I understand, JM4C has a new podcast starting. So Erin, if you could talk to us a little bit about that new program.
Yeah, so this is really exciting as well. The podcast name is going to be Together for Change. We're going to be starting this in August. We wanted to start in July, but we had a bit of a hang up with the microphones. They're coming. They're just not here yet. So we're going to be talking about basically anything substance use related, and how we can tie that into prevention and how prevention works. Our first episode is going to be mostly a background and history, what prevention is. It's going to be a 101. But then after that, we're going to be able to dive more deeply into certain topics, such as how substance use can change your brain chemistry, or the actual development of your brain, and create different pathways through your brain that didn't exist there before. We'll be able to talk about some of the more hot topic items, such as marijuana legalization and what that would look like if it happened in Wisconsin,
Yep.
and how can we protect our kids.
Everyone's talking about that right now.
Yes, everyone's talking about that. So we're going to have a lot of really neat topics, and that's something that we'll be able to do at least once a month as well.
Great.
We're going to start by focusing on alcohol, and then move on from there.
So is this going to be led by just your staff? Are you going to have maybe special guests or people calling in, or maybe even kids on the show? Do you guys kind of see the future of the podcast already?
So the plan to start with is I'll be your host, Erin Davis,
Yay!
JM4C. And then following that, we'll definitely have a lot of guest speakers, and we certainly hope to incorporate kids
Wonderful.
in the show.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
I don't have any expertise, so I can't be on the show, but I'll definitely listen. So we've talked about prevention in the park. We've talked about kind of some of those special programs you have coming up, the podcast. Any other special programs or upcoming events that you'd like to share?
The rest of the summer should be fairly quiet, but then once the school year kicks off, we'll be getting busy again. We're always looking for volunteers, so anybody watching that is interested in volunteering and being part of this movement should certainly give us a call.
That's wonderful, yes. And I know that volunteering in the city organization, they're always looking for volunteers. There's a great resource on the United Way Blackhawk Region's website. They have a Get Connected page where they can post things that need volunteers, and we all have a partnership with that. So between all of those opportunities, hopefully it'd be a great opportunity for JM4C to capture some of those volunteers as well. So.
Yeah.
For anyone who may be watching and needs an opportunity to give back or is interested in working with the youth of our community, what a great opportunity. So we are just about out of time. Is there anything else that you'd like to highlight, Erin? Anything that I missed?
I'd just like to thank all of our partners, all of our volunteers, our funders. We really appreciate it, and we know that we couldn't do it without them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your afternoon with me.
Yes.
Really enjoyed talking to you. I knew a little bit about JM4C, and I know a lot more now. So thank you for spending the time. Oh, and one more question.
Yes.
If anyone needed to get a hold of you, Erin, how could they do that?
They could reach me at 608-741-2105 or at edavis@jm4c.org.
Or on the website?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. If you have any questions for Erin Davis or want more information about JM4C, I know she and her staff of 5 would be happy to talk to you. Refer to the contact information here, or you can always find it online. Thank you, Erin, for your time today and informing us about the important work JM4C is doing for the people and especially the youth in the Janesville community and beyond. I'm looking forward to the events that you mentioned and tuning into JM4C's podcast as well. And as always, thank you, viewers at home, for tuning in. On next month's episode of Park Place Views, we'll have the opportunity to sit down with Steve Pufall, who's the superintendent of the Janesville School District. Believe it or not, the 2019-2020 school year is just around the corner, and Steve will give us some great information for this very busy time of year. In addition to tuning into this program on a monthly basis, stay connected to the City of Janesville by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can also sign up to receive emails with our press releases and other important information. And you can subscribe to get emergency alerts from the Janesville Police Department on Nixle. For Park Place Views and the City of Janesville, I'm Molly Nolte. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.